Hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Mārtiņš Saulītis, and I'm with IBM X-Force Incident Response Services. Sounds very fancy, but it is what it directly is. We help our clients during incidents, and I will take the chance of this presentation to talk about one aspect of incidents we see in the wild, and that's ransomware. Agenda is very simple. I will talk about what ransomware is, how it came to be, what could you potentially do to avoid getting infected by ransomware, what to do in case you have been infected by ransomware, and how and what should be done with some little thought about potential future. Let's start with very simple things, and that's definitions. We love those. Two definitions from two vendors I just picked randomly. It's not preference or anything, but basically this premise stays the same. Ransomware is a type of malware which limits or prevents your access to your data, to your systems, maybe to your infrastructure, up until the point where you pay some kind of ransom, usually in form of money, and then maybe you will get your data, your device, your infrastructure back. If you do a quick Google search, Google even knows what ransomware is and helpfully offers you a description on that as well. Very obvious question rises out of that. Is it profitable? Why people do it and why we still are talking about ransomware? As it turns out, it is actually very, very profitable. When it started back up in, let's say, 5-6 years ago, initially the more activity of ransomware was related to Russia, but now we have seen cases all over the world, and even in Latvia we have seen cases where campaigns against Latvian customers, against Latvian companies are made, and they are very sophisticated in way of how they get in. But I will talk about that a little bit later. Now let's talk about how profitable it is. So a few years ago, in 2013, one of the vendors published a research that in the first quarter of the year, they have seen 250,000 samples. By this, they mean unique samples, not the same sample multiple times. Okay, 250,000 is a number and it means little, but they offered a chance to see the same period for the year before. And in 1 year, they have seen growth of over 2 times in number of samples. And that's just one vendor. All these samples lead, of course, to infections and to some people paying ransom. So we come back to the question I started this slide with, is it profitable? According to FBI, by 2016, some people in total have paid $200 million in ransom. And that's, again, just data by FBI. In comparison, in 2015, year before, just some 25 million were paid. So you can see almost 10 times as much money was paid in ransom. That's a lot. Then there is research by Cyber Threat Alliance on one simple strand of ransomware called CryptoWall. And in this research they published, they were looking just at the campaigns of CryptoWall 3. By 2015, this strand of ransomware, by their estimate, has earned $300 million for the guys who created it, published it, and got other people and companies infected. Now the logical next question is, okay, so clearly, these are very big campaigns which are organized, targeted, and tailored for specific regions, for specific countries, maybe for some specific groups of people. Is it hard to do? Does it cost a lot? Could I do it, maybe? And a while ago, about a year or 2 years ago, BBC did a research, and they discovered that you can buy a kit for ransomware on dark web for about $6,000. And if you use this kit, and basically it's very simple to use, almost like a nice graphical GUI where you choose your options and you then publish the ransomware out on the internet, you could potentially earn about $90,000 in the first month of operation. So I would say it's a potentially very good investment of your money, unless you're afraid that somebody will come and arrest you, because that also happens. All in all, we can see that this is profitable, although it's clearly illegal. And this is still going on because the data is very recent. We then could come to the question, which is also very logical, about some examples. So how old is ransomware? As it turns out, it is not something which started 6-7 years ago, as we have heard in recent news. It is actually something which came out in 1989 in December. And there was an incident, first incident related to ransomware, which was called AIDS information diskette incident afterwards, because researchers like to label things, and this is what the name they chose for it. Name was chosen very directly because the diskette, which was mailed out to potential targets, advertised that it contains information about how you could evaluate your lifestyle and understand how big of the risk you have in terms of being infected with AIDS. So something which could be potentially very interesting to some people. And these 20,000 disks were mailed out to people in Europe, Africa, Australia, and other addressees of World Health Organization. Addresses themselves were gathered by hacking PC World database, which contained a lot of addresses. And after infection, this virus, or more precisely Trojan, did a very simple thing. It counted how many times you turn off and on your computer. So after 90 times, it decided that's enough. It has stayed its infection for some time, and it encodes all your file names, leaving just the ransom node behind. But as we know, encoding essentially is not something that loses your data. It just obfuscates your data in a way, so you could potentially still get it back. Since it was first ever ransomware, it was very simple. It asked for just $189 to be mailed to a PO box in Panama. And it also very nicely gave the name of the gentleman who created the virus, because he wanted the money in the end. So, of course, he was arrested, prosecuted, and in the end, I think he also served some sentence for this crime. So very simple, very first, some mistakes were made, and over the course of 20-something years, of course, people have learned from them and made much more sophisticated cases. So let's look at the timeline on how the ransomware has progressed. As we can see, the first known infection is in 1899 by AIDS Trojan. Then we jump forward quite a lot to 2005, where we have GP code, and then much more recent samples, and we can see how packed the graph gets as we move towards nowadays, 2016. And in my mind, very important and very nice to see is that we have, for example, Tesla Crypt. We have version 3, version 4, version 4.1. It means that these campaigns are ongoing and they improve on what they have, and it's not something that will go away. And logical question which rises out of it is, why is it not going away? Is it so simple to do? Is there no effective means to prevent from being infected by ransomware? Because we clearly have examples that it works, and it works very nicely since time and effort is invested to create it. So this will be a bit longer slide. I will talk about how ransomware operates in principle. It could be applied to any ransomware with some notes and remarks. So we have ransomware somewhere out on the internet, and it somehow gets delivered to the person that will be infected. It could be via email. You have probably seen or heard or even received emails about, hey, this is your tax return, please open it and you will get some money back from the government, or this is unpaid invoice that you did not pay 2 months ago. If you do not pay, we will prosecute you or something. Or, hey, this is email from your friend, I have never emailed you, but please look at this document, it's very important, or something similar. Or you could just go on the web, on some web page, which is in the end exploiting your browser. And it doesn't mean that you are one to blame because you have not applied patches or security updates. There are cases where these campaigns use unknown vulnerabilities or zero-day attacks against your browser. And they just exploit it, download the ransomware, and it will run, and you will have not done anything beyond the fact that you went on the internet. Anyway, so you have ransomware on your computer now, and it has to start its work. Nowadays, they don't usually wait for 90 times until you switch on and off your computer, since we live in always-on environment almost, so it could happen in 2 years maybe. So instead, ransomware goes out on the internet itself, and it goes to their command and control server for a very simple thing. They want to have encryption key. And encryption key will be used to encrypt your files. If you remember from the very first presentation about cryptography and quantum cryptography, it was touched upon about public and private keys. Well, the same things are used in ransomware. Why? Because they work, and properly implemented cryptography works. So they ask for keys to be generated, and public key is then brought into your machine and is used to encrypt your files. And since you don't have a private key to decrypt the files, you will not get them back. So what files will be encrypted? Well, this is a tricky question. There are ransomwares which go after very specific file types. There are ransomwares which go after very broad file types. And this is usually the point where most companies fail, and not because they are bad, but just because they are not looking at security enough. By default, most ransomwares will encrypt what is on your computer, either your private computer or your company's computer. Afterwards, they will start looking around. Mostly, at first, they will try and look what you have plugged into your computer. So it could be a flash drive, it could be an external drive. And we have seen cases where, and I have seen cases personally, where person is doing a good thing. They are backing up their family photos, their family documents, and they're doing that on external drive, and they are doing that regularly, let's say once a week. But since they are lazy, and people by default are lazy, they keep the drive plugged in. So they get infected, their computer gets encrypted, and their backups get encrypted as well, so the data is lost anyway. And then if you have some file shares, the ransomware will go out on the file shares and encrypt everything there as well. And this file share encryption is what I want to touch upon, because this is something that companies fail with. They fail because they give too many rights. And soon I will give an example where one of our customers failed in this way with ransomware because they gave too many rights to too many people. And in the end, when all is done, of course, you have the nice notification that please pay us X amount of money and you will get the files back. However, I would like to prefix that with the caveat that you may get the files back. We have seen cases where ransomware had not implemented cryptography correctly, so it encrypted the files but could not decrypt them, even if you paid and got the key back. So it's not given that it will work. And now the example about the bank, which one day discovered that about 500,000 files are encrypted. They can't access them, and of course it happens in a way that it's not immediately discovered. It is discovered by somebody who goes on the file share and says, hey, I can't open this file anymore, and they ring the help desk, and then slowly they get understanding of the bigger picture. And when we started to investigate this incident, we noticed that, and we discovered that this incident happened very straightforward. It wasn't anything sophisticated. The employee in the bank received the document via email from somebody he never had communicated with, which stated that, hey, you have received a package. This is the information about the package, so you can get it from DHL. And he was like, yes, I got the package, but there was no thought about, did I order anything? Am I expecting something or anything else? He just opened the document, and that's it. He was infected with ransomware in the scheme I described earlier. Ransomware started to run, encrypted his files, encrypted the file share, and then just showed the message, and he panicked and just shut everything down and went home and didn't tell anyone. But coming back to the point is, so one guy, by making a relatively simple mistake, caused his employer to lose 500,000 files. The question is, should this one single employee had access to 500,000 files on the file share? And in the end, it was discovered that no, he should not. He should have access, write access to a very small amount of the files. And this, essentially a slip in security and in control, was because they assigned full access to everyone on the file share. So anyone infected with ransomware in the bank would have led to the same result. So it's the case of multiple levels of failure. It's not the case that this guy failed by opening the document. It's also that other things were not done properly, and so you have to think about it in the long term. So, okay, your files are encrypted. Everything is bad. What we can do? As we know from the first presentation, we can wait about 20 years when the quantum computers will be good enough, and we will be able to break cryptography, which is used now, but maybe we can do something better. There are people called malware researchers who do analysis on malware, who try to understand how the malware works, how it can be detected by maybe antivirus engines, how it can be killed from working in your environment. And from time to time, they have a lucky hit, and they discover how to reverse encryption on some ransomware. These are some links to tools which they publish, so you can decrypt your files, but don't rely on it that, yes, somebody will discover a way how to get files back. The guys who are creating this ransomware and creating these campaigns, they understand this as well, and they are working very hard to make it impossible for you to get files back unless you pay. So, okay, I talked about the generic sample of how infections happens, but maybe let's talk about a little bit about how infections happen in reality, and this is something we have seen. This is not something out of some research by somebody else. So, of course, you get an email with an attachment that says, this is important, please open. And at that point in time, they are trying to socially engineer you because you see important urgent, open now, and you panic a little and your guard drops. And you open the file and everything happens afterwards. As I mentioned, of course, it may be a case where you don't do anything wrong per se. You just go on the internet, go onto your web page, and still get infected. And in that case, in those cases, it may be not even your fault. It may be that this legitimate server you visit every day or every second day was hacked, and something was planted on it for you to get infected. It may be that you did not apply security patches, and it was much easier for them to exploit your browser or some browser plugin, and then exploit your computer that way, but it's not always your fault. And of course, it may be the case where something already was broken in the environment. So for a bigger company, it could be something they have on the internal network. We have seen cases where infected machines have been backed up, then the environment was cleaned, and after some time, the backups were put back into production, and infection started up again. And it was an unfortunate discovery after some time that, hey, we have this infection again, and how could it be? We fixed it, theoretically. What you could do to be proactive and prevent this from happening. This is the goal. This is the goal of what I do in my day-to-day job, not only to help customers understand what went wrong, but what could be done to prevent it from happening again. Well, first and foremost, work with your users. Or if you're a private person, work with yourself and try to understand what could you do to make it better. So educate your users. Maybe if you're a company, run phishing campaigns against your employees to understand who is more gullible to click on the links, open documents, and then work with them to make them understand that, hey, you have to be aware that there could be something wrong going on and somebody could be trying to exploit your trust. As I mentioned, restrict rights. Do really everyone in your company needs access to every file on the file share with rights to change them? Is it really necessary? There are Windows policies in place which could be used to make your environment better. There is what is called software restriction policies, and they work very well. We have seen that as being the case. And of course, apply security patches. It will be something that was said and no doubt will be said here today again, but please do update your devices, update your operating systems, and update your software. And of course, moving one step back, you have to look at your perimeter. You look at your ingress and egress options in your network. As I mentioned a few slides back, when ransomware gets in, it has to go out in most cases and ask for encryption key. If you limit options for that to happen, most probably ransomware will not run because it can't encrypt files. It doesn't have the static key embedded in it. Because if you have static keys, you can then use one key to decrypt all files encrypted by it, of course. And this is what the bad guys who do this do not want to happen. Since most of the cases you will get ransomware droppers or first stage of disinfection via email, it may be useful for you to check the way what emails get in your organization. Check for attachments. Do they contain something which could be potentially bad? And maybe block them or investigate more before you let them through. And one thing which also is important is what is called Tor, or anonymous internet, which gives you access to what is called deep web or dark web. Normally, we don't see reason why this should be available and accessible to employees of any organization, normally. So maybe it is something that should be blocked by default. And why it should be blocked is very simple. Most of the guys host command and control servers within this part of the, let's say, dark web. So you can't find them very easily. But if you know how they connect to it, you can block it permanently, so it's not happening in such an easy way. We have also published a guide. It is available for free, which guides you through how you can prepare, detect, how you can contain ransomware infections, and what you can do in case you want to train your people and how you can make them more aware. This guide is available for free. Only thing we ask in return is your email address. We will not send you very much spam, but just a little bit. So we talked about many things, so let's maybe try and summarize. What I try to tell to you in this presentation is basically prepare and be vigilant. There is no one single solution that will make you secure. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, please buy this, it will fix all your problems, they are lying to you. It's not possible. There is no one solution, and there will not be one solution which will solve all your problems. Train your people, harden your systems, patch them, maybe work with your overall security approach, how you would like to solve this. And don't think that you can fix it by fixing one single point. You have to look at the environment completely, and then you will have better position than you had before. From my side, this is everything. Do you have any questions? Going once. Twice? Okay. In that case, thank you.